All right, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Rich here. Rich was founder and former CEO of Complex Networks, the prime spot of all of culture and media for footwear and fashion, etc. You started off as really just kind of understanding the media industry as I think you were account manager at the Men's Journal, and just you kind of worked your way up to really be able to build something that was incredibly unique in the space. So it's great to have you here, Rich. I'm looking forward to getting into your story.
Thank you very much. And it is quite the story. Not
Agreed.
exactly what we call traditional.
For sure. So when you were growing up, did you aspire to be like this entrepreneur, this business kind of tech leader? How did this passion start?
So, hardly. Look, I grew up in Brooklyn, um, and a public school kid. And you have to remember, I'm on the older side. I was born in 71. So I grew up late 70s, early 80s. There was not exactly a lot of knowledge base. If you didn't live in certain neighborhoods and your parents didn't do certain jobs, you didn't even
Hmm.
know what the word entrepreneur meant. Like, forget about being in the popular culture as like part of the vernacular. It was just not even part of anybody's thought process. So, and when I was 15, 16 years old and I saw Wall Street, I was like, the only thing I knew is I wanted to make a lot of money. And so I immediately got very attracted to business. And I thought I was going to be a broker. I thought I was going to go into finance. I thought I was going to be a banker or something like that. And when I went to college, I absolutely fell in love. I did an internship at BBDO, and I fell in love with media and marketing and advertising. And they didn't exactly, by the way, it doesn't exactly pay well. So when I came out of school in 1993, I took a job, no overtime, working at Saatchi and Saatchi, working on Procter and Gamble for $20,000 a year.
Wow.
And yeah, you're supposed to live in New York and be able to eat on that. By the way, that doesn't really compute. Um, so, but I will tell you this. Working at an agency in the 90s, especially kind of the largest advertising agency in the world, and working on one of the largest advertisers in the world and probably the most progressive, working on Procter, was basically like, instead of me paying to go to grad school, I got paid. I didn't get paid a lot, but I got paid very little to basically get trained by some of the smartest people on the planet and get exposed to some of the largest advertising campaigns, thought process, and very aggressive, unique ways to think about things. So I got a chance to cut my teeth. Quickly, I kept getting told that I wasn't a media person, and I got pushed into sales. Went over to Men's Journal, launched a product, a magazine for National Geographic called Adventure Magazine. And I was always very brand oriented in all of those. So I had an opportunity when I met Mark Ekko and Seth Gersberg and Marcy, Mark's twin, and they wanted to launch a magazine, but didn't know anything about media, which, by the way, is always very funny. So I was very lucky, but that's 20, what's that, 24 years ago, 23 years ago. And then obviously everybody knows the story of Complex. So there you go.
So why this kind of like focus on advertising and media? It's just something you were drawn to that you liked, or were you just good at it?
Well, actually, like, I'm kind of a numbers guy, so I was very
Mhm.
good at math and beta curves and yield risks and other things like that. So I fell in love though with the storytelling portion. Storytelling wasn't really a big word in media and marketing and advertising in the 90s. It became later on, but I fell in love with representing a brand and a narrative, and then trying to figure out how to quantitatively measure the impact and influence of the of the content and the narrative these people were putting out and the stories they were putting out. And to me, you had the circulation of a magazine or your audience on a website. That's not really how you quantify. That's one aspect of it. but that's a measurement of how many, not how much influence you have. And the one thing of why Complex, even though, we raised a lot less money than other people, but always punched well above our weight, is irrespective of the mass scale that we had, we always disproportionately influenced and impact our audience. So we were able to provide them more value, therefore provide them more influence. And I fell in love with that at Men's Journal, because at Rolling Stone, at Wenner Media, like that was a master class for me in understanding like how you have to pay up for a premium experience, and then able to do it again, launch something new inside a very large entity like National Geographic. And basically, I got to be an entrepreneur. I got to launch something entrepreneurial inside a larger entity with that leverage. And then that gave me the training wheels. And that combined with the love of brand and premium selling with that kind of corporate experience gave me the perfect kind of leaping off point to go and finally be entrepreneurial on my own.
How did your relationship with Mark Ekko begin, and like, why did he think that you were ideal to really take over with Complex?
So, Mark is, I'd say, more of the qualitative guy. But
Mhm.
like unbelievable, probably one of the more talented people I've ever met in understanding like reference points and kind of having like a large scale understanding of culture. But there was a guy who ran the business side for Echo, is a guy named Seth Gersberg. So very dynamic guy. But Mark is very kind of gregarious, and Seth is
Mhm.
also even more gregarious and more aggressive. And we met, and we ended up having like a 3.5 hour screaming match about like what was right and what was wrong. Like we didn't even know each other, like out of nowhere. And the next day they were like, "All right, can you come here and do this, please?" And I'm like, "I thought you hated me." And they're like, "No, it's kind of like we need somebody who's gonna tell us what to do and also fight with us." So it's like, look, they had an unbelievable brand, they had a lot of capital, they had a wantedness to go into media, and Mark had this unbelievable understanding of culture. And me coming from where I came from and understanding that level of hip hop's, not just hip hop's music, but hip hop's culture, and its unbelievable disproportionate impact on youth culture that I don't think a lot of people understood in the early 2000s. I did, but now it's just starting to get the credit it deserved for the last 30 years. And I look at that whole scenario and I was like, this is an opportunity that I have to go for.
So you felt rich that like nobody was taking advantage of covering and portraying what the youth really were representing with hip hop, and that's kind of what the need was here. It's like to showcase the breadth of the industry of really what it
So,
is.
so yeah, that's one element. There's many factors here, right? So, you wouldn't remember this. I don't even know if you were alive when we launched, but so if you think back to 2002, you had like what was dominating youth culture media were actually magazines, because the internet had not taken over yet. No social networks, nothing. Very different landscape. And you had like everything was vertically categorized in media and in magazines, right? So you had like GQ and Esquire and Details doing fashion. You had Thrasher doing skate. You had the Source and Double XL doing hip hop music and rap. You had Vibe doing like a little bit of culture. And our viewpoints were like, this makes no sense whatsoever. Why do I have to go to a newsstand and buy 6 magazines to get up on all of these? Like concentric circles was not a given back then. Everybody's compartmentalized. And our viewpoint was it didn't matter whether you were white or black. It didn't matter whether you were a guy or a girl. It didn't matter if you were um, into seemingly one of those things. We believed you were into all of those things. So the culmination of being a one-stop shop where it was half culture, and then you'd flip the magazine over and it would be half buyer's guide. So Japanese styling against a an amalgamation of all of the most important things driving youth culture in one place, and this massive cultural understanding of an iceberg, which was hip hop as a culture that wasn't getting the credit. And it was really like it was this lurking iceberg underneath the water. Like to me, all of those factors are really why it was so perfect.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. It was underrepresented. Like, how did you kind of like take this like magazine and the approach that you had with tying in what the best of out there, and then kind of focusing on covering new things too? How did you kind of take that approach and go digital with it? Like, what were the
So
steps to even do that?
very non-traditionally. I'm gonna blow your mind a little bit. So in '06, at the end of '06, we had just become profitable as a magazine. And magazines take a long time, usually 10 years to get profitable in the past. We did it in 3.5 years. And I walked into this guy, the CFO of Echo, which was the guy's name was Dick Thrush. I swear to God, that's his real name. Walk into him and Seth, and I go, good news, bad news. Good news is we just broke even and we're going to turn a profit in '07. Bad news is I have to take all the profits and we have to go hardcore into digital. And by the way, not a fun conversation to have after someone just sunk some money into you and then you get to the point and go, well, now we need to take all of the profits again and put it back. I'm not going to ask you for any more money, but we're going to go into this. And it was only going to be about $1.5 million, $2 million. But at that time, you had portals, which were like AOL and Yahoo, and or you had on the other side of it, you had really crap bag lowest common denominator ad networks that were really just aggregating audience and eyeballs, not really passion points. And my viewpoint was like, let's go to bloggers because again, still like Facebook hadn't really launched, Twitter wasn't around, like none again, social networks gone. So not here yet. And my viewpoint was we had all these blogospheres. We had the New Music Cartel. We had things like Hoff from On Smash, and we had Nah Right, and we had Hip Hop DX. And you had in the sneaker category, had Nice Kicks and Kicks on Fire and Freshness. And and you had Karmaloop and culture stuff. And I was like, these are great, but they don't have the scale independently. They don't know how to sell corporately. They need help of honing their audience and then cross-pollinating it from an audience development perspective. Let's create a closed network from a cultural perspective of all of these verticals that are completely interrelated where we can bounce the audience around and then fully walk in the door as a full entity to Adidas or AT&T or McDonald's and say we have culture on lockdown. And this way, I didn't have to acquire those sites. All we had to do was partner with them, and we did a rev share. So we were able to establish and go hardcore into digital for like less than $1 million of cost structure.
Mhm. And did you think it's just because there was like this whole like this person that was into this kind of culture was into a lot of different things, and by putting them all together, you can maybe generate bigger reach even too? Like, was that kind of the thinking?
Well, it was we definitely were ahead of the curve in understanding people's multiple interest points. We looked at them as entry points, though, not really that. Yes, I don't. We didn't think it was up for debate, but more it was driven by a business principle of trying to organize the fragmentation and segmentation of the category, right? So we knew my viewpoint was things were only going to get as the internet grew, it was only going to get more and more fragmented and segmented. I'm not claiming that I saw the creator economy coming. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we knew that once social networks came, blogospheres and the bloggers were going to proliferate as well. So there'd be more voices, more competition, and someone needed to curate that and authenticate and validate it to the communities so that this is corny stuff. This is the stuff you need to be looking at. And we would kind of crown people and be like, Complex's umbrella of both the business expertise and the revenue we could bring to you and the audience development, but also the cachet of being under the Complex umbrella was also rather large.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, like kind of how you position it. You can get all these brands to come in for like a rev share deals, earlier on, and this advertising network, like that was the value to them. Like, they couldn't get the same kind of advertising. It's
Right.
very unique positioning.
And look, what's amazing is, Facebook explodes into '08, right? And then most big brands didn't jump on social platforms, right? So all the traditional brands and the heritage brands that we were competing with for dollars weren't there. All of the bloggers did, and we were early. So we had a ton of explosive growth from '08 to like 2012 that just it was like a rocket ship. And that enabled us not just to disproportionately um, increase our revenues, but really kind of put a moat around us of owning culture.
And how did this kind of like focus on footwear start? Was that just kind of from the beginning, footwear was so popular in culture? Like it's become such a major part of
So,
things.
I mean, well, it was a major part from us in the beginning. You got to remember when we first launched our first issue, we had 8 pages of sneaker coverage in the first issue. So when most people, maybe you'd see like a sneaker ad in a magazine, or like maybe a little bit like a discussion of something, maybe in a fashion spread where you get a little credit. We were like doing like 8 pages of sneaker coverage because our viewpoint was, and there was no terminology really on a mass basis of sneakerheads, but sneaker culture we knew was disproportionately influential, right? And our viewpoint was, if we own that outright, not only we won't be capturing what has already happened, we'll be defining and be the driver of how big it can get. And, like obviously, I'm not saying we were the only ones who drove it, because I think a lot of the brands, a lot of the people, the organic, the recent, like everything that went with it, grew it. But I think Complex was a big part of defining, like being early and helping grow that, not just participating in covering it.
Yeah. Well, you also like I read somewhere else that you kind of have this like approach. Like it wasn't just about covering. Like a lot of these media outlets, it's all about covering what's going on. It's about creating and defining what that is, because then you can kind of shape the narrative and you can lead in that. How do you really do that? Like how do you kind of lead the pack in that
Here's
sense?
the perfect case example. So what we say is, we make the news, others report on it. And it's a small statement, but it says a lot. So when we would drop a video, whether it's sneaker shopping with Joe LaPuma, or Hot Ones with Sean Evans, or Everyday Struggle, like when Budden and Academics were doing it, like we would start every relevant conversation, and our competitors had no choice but to cover us as the source. Like we would come out and like sneaker shopping and Joe Puma. Every single site would then be like, let's break down the episode. Let's break down the sneakers. Like High Snobiety is like covering us. And like, it's like everybody had no choice. And we didn't do it just in one category. We did it over and over and over again. So what we
Huh.
never chose to do, we didn't want to be reporters. We wanted to be cultural definers, right? So our content was very original versus news. Well, I'm not
So
saying
it
we
seems
didn't do any news, but we did much less as a percentage than most people.
it seems like you kind of were almost like forced in a sense to take advantage of YouTube, to be creating all these like YouTube shows. Like I think you did. I read somewhere you didn't want to give up all the revenue and of it, but you kind of went that route, and it seems like that could have been the best route for you, because there's been YouTube has been such a huge place for all this stuff.
So, look, my viewpoint is, whenever you're going to go do something, there's two things that, no matter what the platform is, no matter what the format is, no matter what the narrative is that you're trying to put out, you have to do two things. You have to go, how is this true and unique to my brand and my audience? So a lot of people just go on platforms and copy what everybody else does, but with their logo on it. And I'm like, if you rip your logo off, no one knows it's you. It's not your tone, it's not your brand. So whatever, even if you're successful or not, it doesn't matter because it's actually not helping your brand. It's not helping the positioning. You're not owning a conversation, right? And so there's the uniqueness and differentiation, and then like, do you have a defensibility around that differentiation as well? It's got to be true to your brand. It's got to be differentiated from everybody else. So when everybody else was doing YouTube at the time, I don't know if you remember, but everybody was like, it was kind of like just single face to camera, like pootie pie type thing.
Yeah.
We were like, we don't want to do that. That's not who we are. We're going to do longer form content. Like we were doing 11 to 22-minute shows when most YouTube content maybe was like 2 minutes long.
Huh.
So we treated YouTube, and I know it's going to sound dumb now, but we always treated them as a network, not a
Hmm.
like a television network that just happened to be digitally distributed. We never looked at them as a social media platform the way a lot of other people did. We
Hmm.
love the organic amplification of audience that came from it, but we looked at it as a premium long form video platform, and we were just very early to the game from that standpoint.
Yeah. How did like the Verizon first act, like joint venture occur? Because they clearly recognized that you had this budding media business and were pioneering in these areas.
So, Verizon launched something called Go 90 with the phone, and
Yeah.
they launched that at the end of 15, beginning of 16. And they were trying to go hardcore at super premium long form content. And they believed that they could be kind of like the kings of that. And we started having strategic conversations about them about being a leader in youth culture content development for them. And the more we started talking, the more I realized these were huge deals, right? Like you're going to give us a lot of money, and it's going to become a big piece of our business. And we started to have we already had Hearst on our board. They had just made an investment in us right before that at the end of September of 2015. And I knew Verizon and Hearst were talking about launching a JV, so Hearst could take their media expertise and Verizon could take their pipes, their distribution pipes, and they could work together in this JV. And I said, guys, well, if you already have the JV, Hearst is already on our cap table, and you're going to write us all these checks. Wouldn't it be great for you to own the IP and then for get the money back on the other side? And now we're 100% aligned with putting our best content onto your platform. And we were able to, from a financial, from a strategic perspective, because of the uniqueness of our brand, we were able to cut a very lucrative deal for everybody, and it was also very well organized initially.
Hmm. Yeah. So kind of BuzzFeed came in and I think acquired after. Were you involved with that at all? Like during that
Yeah,
time?
that was my last deal. So,
Hmm.
Verizon basically sold off all of its media assets other than us, right? AOL was gone, Yahoo was gone, like everything was gone. HuffPo, all those things. And they had shut down, what was that? The name of the other female youth culture brand. But we were alone, right? We were a independent brand that was owned by a JV of Hearst and Verizon. Verizon wasn't really in the media business anymore. They still do sports rights and other things like that, but not really media brands. And Hearst is has a magazine division, has a newspaper division, but we our brand is a little bit of a step out from a great deal of their brands, so it's not like a perfect fit in that. And I was like, maybe we could find a home that would be very strategic, that would recapitalize the business, that brings some different things to the table. Like BuzzFeed's audience expertise was beyond complexes. We were much better on the brand side and the super premium side, but we wanted to disproportionately really look at like how do you form Voltron, and SPACs were very hot at the time. So Jonah was out raising some capital and working with a SPAC, and we thought it was a very, very complimentary opportunity, and we created a fantastic situation where on December 7th of 2021, at the same time, it's like the baptism scene at The Godfather where everyone's getting killed while he's at the thing. So BuzzFeed and us merged. We then reverse merged into the 890 SPAC and went public all at the same time. It was a big day. And, it was a good deal because my owners were able to um, uh, get back a ton of cash in addition to the profits that we had given them over the 5 years. And everybody won on the financial side. And we put an asset into a very seemingly strategic play with BuzzFeed. Now, the market has been disproportionately challenging versus, when we did the deal. I feel bad for both the micro and the macro circumstances that have been less than ideal. But, for me, it was great to be able to sell the asset twice, and also make sure that everybody involved was really taken care of to the greatest degree, both financially and strategically.
So just the last question I have, like, what do you aspire to do next now? You built up Complex. It was a multi-year thing.
Yeah, a multi-decade. Um, you know, Look, I am disproportionately enjoying, I say it this way, is those 22 years, 21 years, 22 years almost killed me several times. And I made so many mistakes and learned so much. And I now have the opportunity to not have to worry about the day-to-day stress, but disproportionately advise, consult, and sit on boards for very dynamic entrepreneurs with a lot more energy than I have, but have a big vision, but maybe need some help honing what that is and how it manifests in reality. And I'm enjoying the hell out of working with some very dynamic companies and very dynamic teams, to do different things across multitudes of sectors. So I have all of the energy and around the challenges and the growth and the building with very little of the stress. So it's kind of a perfect combo for me.
That's great. Well, look, Rich, I appreciate you coming on. I think it's an incredible story that you have, and you've really built a major piece of culture. So I'm always excited to see what you do next, and I wish you much success on it.
Thank you very much.